His name was Brian Roach, and to him, Shamu Stadium wasn't just a workplace, it was a sacred space. Years spent training, learning, and building bonds with these majestic creatures had led him to this point. He wasn't driven by the roar of the crowd or the spotlight's glare. His passion stemmed from a deep respect for the ocean's giants. For Brian, it was about understanding, connection, and pushing the boundaries of what was possible in the delicate dance between humans and orcas. November 15th, 2006, began like any other day. The California sun shone brightly, casting a shimmering reflection on the water's surface. The air was filled with the excited chatter of families eager to witness the awe-inspiring Shamu adventure. Brian, ever the professional, meticulously prepared for the performance, double-checking his equipment and mentally rehearsing the routine. Today's show was a moderate one, a chance to showcase Orchid's incredible intelligence and agility, and it was one that he was looking forward to. Orchid, a magnificent orca weighing in at over 7,000 pounds, was more than just an animal to Brian. She was a partner. Their bond, forged through countless hours of training, was built on mutual respect and trust. He knew her moods, her quirks, her strengths and weaknesses, or at least he thought he did. As Brian approached the edge of the pool, the familiar scent of salt water filled his nostrils. He paused for a moment, taking a deep breath, centering himself. The announcer's voice boomed through the stadium, building anticipation as the show was about to begin. With a final nod to his fellow trainers, Brian gracefully entered the water. The initial moments of the performance were flawless. Orchid responded beautifully to Brian's cues, executing each behavior with precision and grace. The audience roared with delight as she leaped and twirled, showcasing her remarkable athleticism. But as the routine progressed, Brian sensed a subtle shift in Orchid's demeanor. Her movements became less fluid, less responsive. There was a tension in the water, an unspoken energy that made the hair on the back of Brian's neck stand on end. He tried to remain calm, attributing her behavior to a momentary lapse in focus. But deep down, he knew something wasn't right. Orchid began to circle him, her powerful body cutting through the water with a speed that was unsettling. It wasn't the playful circling they had practiced countless times. This was different. This was predatory. This was calculating. Her eyes, usually filled with intelligence and curiosity, now held a cold, unsettling intensity. Brian attempted to regain control of the situation, issuing familiar commands, but Orchid ignored him. She continued to circle, her eyes fixed on him, a silent predator sizing up its prey. The playful atmosphere of the show had vanished, replaced by an eerie silence that hung heavy in the air. Then, without warning, Orchid lunged. The attack was swift and brutal. Before Brian could react, Orchid seized his left leg in her powerful jaws. The force of the bite was immense, sending a searing pain shooting through his body. In an instant, he was dragged beneath the surface, the world above fading into a blurry kaleidoscope of light and sound. Panic threatened to engulf him, but Brian fought to remain calm. Years of training had instilled in him a sense of discipline and focus, even in the face of mortal danger. He knew that his survival depended on his ability to think clearly and act decisively. As Orchid pulled him deeper into the abyss, Brian struggled to free himself from her grip. He kicked and pulled, but her hold was unyielding. The crushing pressure of the water intensified, squeezing the air from his lungs. His vision began to blur, and his body screamed in protest. Time seemed to stretch into an eternity as Brian fought. For his life beneath the surface, he knew that every second counted, that his chances of survival diminished with each passing moment. The playful dance between man and beast had transformed into a desperate struggle for survival. He attempted to pry, Orchid's jaws open, but her grip was unshakable. The cold, dark water enveloped him, and a sense of helplessness washed over him. Was this it? Was this how it all ended? Just as he began to lose hope, Orchid suddenly released her grip. Brian shot towards the surface, his lungs burning, his heart pounding in his chest. He broke through the water, gasping for air, his body trembling with exhaustion and fear. He had survived, but the ordeal had changed him forever. The dream job had become a nightmare, and the bond he thought he shared with Orchid was shattered, replaced by a chilling realization of the inherent dangers of working with these powerful, unpredictable animals. The so-called trust, the partnership, it was always an illusion. He was a performer, she was a killer, and in that moment, Brian knew nothing would ever be the same again. Orchid, even her name, chosen to evoke beauty and grace, now carries a chilling weight, because behind the shimmering performances, behind the carefully crafted illusion of harmony between human and whale, lay a history of aggression, a litany of ignored warning signs that screamed of a creature pushed to its breaking point. Let's be clear, the attack on Brian Roach wasn't some inexplicable out-of-a-blue event. It was the culmination of years of simmering tension, of a captive orca exhibiting increasingly volatile behavior, and of a corporation seemingly more concerned with its bottom line than the well-being of its trainers and the animals in its care. Former trainers, speaking anonymously for fear of professional repercussions, paint a picture far removed from the sun-drenched smiles and synchronized swims the public witnessed. They describe Orchid as intelligent, yes, but also as dominant and unpredictable. She was a whale who tested boundaries, who seemed to understand her own power and was not afraid to exert it. Orchid was smart, recalls one former senior trainer. She knew what she could get away with. She'd push and push until you gave her what she wanted. And if you didn't, she could turn on a dime. These turns, these sudden shifts in temperament, weren't isolated incidents. There were reports of Orchid refusing commands, splashing trainers with deliberate force, and even lunging at the edge of the pool, knocking trainers off balance. One incident involved Orchid grabbing a toy being held by a trainer and refusing to release it, yanking so violently that the trainer was nearly pulled into the water. These incidents, while documented internally, were often dismissed as playful or minor behavioral issues. But were they really? Or were they desperate cries for attention? Manifestations of the frustration and psychological distress inherent in a life confined to a concrete tank. The mental toll of captivity on orcas is staggering. These are animals designed to roam vast ocean distances, to hunt cooperatively in complex social structures, to experience the richness and complexity of a natural environment. Confined to a small fraction of their natural range, forced to perform repetitive tricks for food, they suffer from chronic stress, boredom, and a profound sense of deprivation. Imagine being built to swim hundreds of miles a day, says Dr. Naomi Rose, a marine mammal scientist with decades of experience studying captive orcas. Imagine having a brain that's 5 times the size of ours, designed to process vast amounts of information from a complex environment. Now imagine being stuck in a bathtub, day after day, year after year. It's torture. The physical manifestations of this psychological distress are often overlooked. Worn-down teeth from gnawing on the metal gates of their enclosures, self-inflicted injuries from boredom and frustration, and abnormal behaviors like repetitive circling are all signs of a compromised mental state. But SeaWorld, according to former trainers and animal welfare advocates, consistently downplayed these warning signs. The focus was on maintaining the illusion of a happy, healthy animal, an image that was crucial to attracting paying customers. There was always pressure to put on a good show, explains another former trainer. If an orca was acting out, you were expected to find a way to work through it, to get them to perform. The emphasis was always on the show, not on the whale's well-being. This pressure to perform, coupled with a culture of minimizing risk, created a dangerous environment for both trainers and orcas. Trainers were often told that Orchid was safe and that she knew the boundaries. But as Brian Roach discovered, those boundaries were fragile, easily shattered by the pent-up frustration of a captive animal. The question then becomes, was the attack on Brian Roach truly unforeseeable? Or was it a predictable consequence of keeping intelligent, complex animals in conditions that were fundamentally unnatural and inherently stressful? The answer, according to experts and former trainers, is clear. The attack was not unforeseeable. It was a tragedy waiting to happen, a direct result of a system that prioritized profit over the well-being of both humans and animals. SeaWorld's attempts to downplay the risks, to dismiss Orchid's history of aggression as playful behavior, were not only misleading but also deeply irresponsible. They created a false sense of security that put trainers in harm's way and ultimately contributed to the tragic events of November 15, 2006. The incident with Brian Roach should have served as a wake-up call, a stark reminder that keeping orcas in captivity is inherently dangerous and ethically questionable. But tragically, it was just one in a series of events that would ultimately expose the dark underbelly of the marine park industry and spark a global debate about the ethics of keeping these magnificent creatures in captivity. The world would soon realize Brian's attack was not an isolated incident, but rather a symptom of a much larger problem and cover-up, and that more people would be hurt. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of carefully controlled chaos. While Brian Roach was rushed to receive medical attention, SeaWorld sprung into damage control. The show was immediately cancelled, the audience ushered out with vague explanations about unforeseen circumstances. But the whispers were already spreading, fueled by the sheer, terrifying spectacle some had witnessed, even if they didn't fully understand it. Behind the scenes, it was a different story. An internal investigation was launched, the kind that prioritized risk assessment and liability over genuine concern for the well-being of their employees and the orcas. The incident report, now a matter of public record thanks to subsequent legal battles, painted a sanitized picture, downplaying the severity of the attack and carefully omitting the long history of warning signs associated with Orchid. SeaWorld's primary objective was clear: protect the brand, maintain public confidence, and keep the lucrative orca shows running. But the attack had a profound effect on the trainers, a shift in morale that couldn't be easily ignored. The illusion of control, the carefully constructed narrative of harmonious partnership between humans and orcas, had been shattered. Fear became a constant companion, lurking beneath the surface of every interaction. Trainers who had once approached their work with unwavering enthusiasm now hesitated, second-guessing every cue, acutely aware of the immense power they were dealing with and the fragility of their own position. And then there was Brian Roach. His physical wounds would eventually heal, but the psychological scars remained, a constant reminder of the day he nearly lost his life. He never spoke extensively about the attack, preferring to maintain a quiet dignity, but those close to him described a profound change in his perspective. The unwavering belief he once held in the benefits of captivity began to crumble, replaced by a growing sense of unease and regret. He questioned the ethics of confining these intelligent, complex creatures to concrete tanks, forcing them to perform for entertainment. The bond he thought he shared with Orchid was irrevocably broken, replaced by a haunting realization. These were wild animals, and their instincts could never be fully suppressed. He quietly transitioned to a less hands-on role at SeaWorld, working behind the scenes, his passion for marine life now tempered by a deep sense of responsibility and a growing conviction that things needed to change. Brian's experience, though horrific, was sadly not unique. The incident served as a chilling precursor to other, even more tragic events that would shake the foundations of SeaWorld and the entire marine park industry. In 2009, Alexis Martinez, a trainer at Loro Park in Tenerife, Spain, lost his life during a training session with an orca named Kato. Then, in 2010, the world watched in horror as Dawn Bruncho, a highly experienced trainer at SeaWorld Orlando, was brutally killed by Tilikum, an orca with a long history of aggression. These incidents, broadcast across news outlets and social media, sparked a global outcry and forced a long overdue reckoning with the ethics of keeping orcas in captivity. The public began to question the rosy narratives promoted by marine parks, demanding greater transparency and accountability. Documentaries like Blackfish, released in 2013, played a pivotal role in exposing the dark underbelly of the industry, revealing the psychological and physical toll that captivity took on these magnificent animals. The film highlighted the unnatural conditions in which orcas were kept, the forced separation of mothers and calves, and the suppression of their natural behaviors. It also featured interviews with former SeaWorld trainers who spoke candidly about the dangers they faced and the ethical dilemmas they grappled with. The impact of Blackfish was undeniable. Public opinion shifted dramatically, attendance at SeaWorld parks declined, and the company faced mounting pressure from animal rights activists, lawmakers, and the general public. Protests erupted outside park entrances, demanding the release of the orcas to sea sanctuaries. Celebrities boycotted SeaWorld, and some schools even cancelled field trips to the parks. The growing public awareness and criticism forced SeaWorld to make significant changes. In 2016, the company announced that it would end its orca breeding program and phase out its theatrical orca shows. While this was hailed as a victory by animal welfare advocates, many argued that it was not enough. The orcas, already in captivity, would continue to live out their lives in concrete tanks, deprived of the freedom and social connections they would have experienced in the wild. The debate continues to this day. While SeaWorld has made strides in improving its animal welfare standards and focusing on rescue and rehabilitation efforts, the fundamental question remains: is it ethical to confine these intelligent, sentient beings for human entertainment? The tragic events surrounding Brian Roach and the subsequent orc-related tragedies serve as a stark reminder of the inherent risks and ethical complexities involved in keeping orcas in captivity. They underscore the urgent need for a more compassionate and sustainable approach to marine conservation, one that prioritizes the well-being of these magnificent creatures and respects their right to live wild and free. The echoes of those splashes, the cries of those trainers, the somber truth remains: change must come, and it must come now.